because I feel that the government is...
Never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
Black Lives Matter has been by far the biggest movement of probably any of our lifetimes. What started as an idea eventually grew to a worldwide phenomenon that gained attraction from celebrities to corporations to politicians and some of the most influential and public figures in the world. And then the money started pouring in. Thousands quickly turns to tens of thousands, to hundreds of thousands, to millions, tens of millions, and even billions of dollars. Corporations like Facebook, to Nike, to everybody in between, Amazon and the likes have invested tens of millions of dollars alone. But that leaves the world wondering, where has all this money gone? We haven't seen... At least the black communities haven't seen a single penny of it. And the longer that this goes and the more money that racks up, the more questions these black communities, especially the ones who have been burnt to the ground over the last summer, based on what we saw in George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and all of the other unjust, or whatever you want to call it, killings by cops against black people. As they accumulated, so did the burning down of these cities. But now these cities are furious. They're waiting for their payback. They're waiting for the Democrats, the likes of Kamala Harris and every other politician who stood by their side and fighted bringing down corruption. They're now wondering where the help is now. And they seem to have more and more questions as the days go on. Today, we're going to start our show on Facebook listening to a pastor tell his story about the fact in South Chicago, or the south side of Chicago, his city has been left in absolute ruins. And there's no one there to help them now, and they haven't seen a single penny. Let's over to the article on Facebook and Fox News and check it out. So as Black Lives Matter rakes in tens of millions of dollars, a Chicago neighborhood is struggling to bounce back from the looting and violence that followed the death of George Floyd last May. There is a serious disconnect. There's a serious disconnect between Black Lives Matter and American struggling neighborhoods. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's left these cities in absolute ruins. It's destroyed them. And they're now kind of all walking around aimlessly thinking, where's the support? Where's all that money that's been raised? Where's the $90 million that Black Lives Matter reported? Where is that money to help us now? You've gotten the message out. The world understands your cause. Cities are now going through police reform. You've gotten the job done. Yes, there could be room for improvement. Yes, they still have a long way to go. But what are they doing with that money? So reporters are now going all over the world, or all over the country at least, to these cities that have been destroyed. And they're on the ground asking the black community, what's going on here? Is anybody helping you? Have politicians been by? Have directors of the movement been by? Has money been given to you to help rebuild all of your destroyed businesses? And sadly, the answer every time is no. Let's take a look at a story that I'm going to start with today. A reporter heads over to the south side of Chicago. He writes an article, Black Lives Matter's Disconnect with America's Struggling Neighborhoods. So we're going to discuss Pastor Corey Brooks today, who suffered horribly after Floyd's death. And his story is interesting because he really highlights and paints a picture of the perception from other members of the black community and how stumped he is that people even fell for the movement, especially after decades of other very reputable and honest groups that wanted to help the black communities out, have gotten no attention at all. So several weeks ago, this reporter, he travels to the south side of Chicago and he drives through icy streets past businesses and homes. He did not see a single Black Lives Matter sign. We're talking total destruction here. These cities have been ruined. They've been burnt to the ground. He doesn't see anything but total carnage and chaos. So he enters a New Beginnings church and discusses with Pastor Corey Brooks the situation there on the ground. This is in the south side of Chicago. They joked that he thought he would see more Black Lives Matter support in the neighborhood. This reporter's going around Chicago. He's kind of joking with the pastor. Where's all the support? Where's the community rebuilding? Where are the Black Lives Matter signs? So he's walking around, and this is a story that's been told time and time again amongst many of the other black communities. They're ghost towns, totally deserted. So he's talking to Corey, this pastor, and Corey starts telling him his story. Corey says, then I asked if his nonprofit, a community center called Project Hood, had received any of the $90 million that Black Lives Matter had raised since the death of George Floyd. And the pastor says, no, I haven't seen a single penny of this. So in this neighborhood that's been completely destroyed, his community has not received a single penny. And this story represents so many stories that we see here today. Of the $90 million, has Pastor Corey seen any of it for his project, which he calls Project Hood, a nonprofit in the south side of Chicago? And the pastor answers, no, I haven't seen a damn penny of it. So the pastor wondered if the looted stores would ever come back. Clearly, he's wondering, and like so many black members of the community are wondering, are these businesses ever going to be rebuilt? Are we going to ever see any sort of financial aid? So this pastor's wondering if the looted stores would ever come back. He had spent the last 2 decades in his neighborhood, improving it every possible way. So this poor man spent decades improving his neighborhood, building his business, improving it in every possible way so businesses would set up shop and provide countless employment opportunities to the locals. But who would invest hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, only to lose everything in a single night's violence? And that is the frustration that so many of the black members of these communities face right now. They spent their entire life, generations, building their business. And not just their business. They contributed a very selfless act of kindness to the entire neighborhood in general, so that other businesses would now come to their area. And they spent tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars collectively amongst the neighborhood businesses to have it all be brought down in a single night. The pastor continues to talk about his story, and he also brings up the fact that several of his neighbors, so Pastor Corey goes on to say, several of my neighbors in Los Angeles who had never given much thought to race suddenly put up Black Lives Matter signs in their yards or windows. One of them wrote, I see you, on her sign and let it drop during our conversation that she donated $500 to Black Lives Matter. So he's talking about his neighbor being all proud and suddenly feeling self-righteous that she, for once in her life, decided to donate $500 to the Black Lives Matter group. So pastor goes on to tell her, well, hold on a second. There are so many worthy organizations that had been toiling to uplift the lower class long before the arrival of Black Lives Matter. So what happened? Where were you then? All of a sudden, you're now interested in supporting the movement. Why? Because it's trending? Because the hashtag BLM is now supposed to be some cool trend that you suddenly want to jump on the bandwagon over? So the pastor's going on to tell his neighbors, we've been trying to donate and invest in these rundown communities for decades and nobody's cared. The black lives or the black community didn't care. Not once. So all of a sudden there's a trending movement called BLM and they jump on board, not because they all of a sudden had an epiphany, because they wanted some of the limelight. They felt they can get their 5 seconds of fame by dropping some cash on a hashtag. And that's really all that's happened. So the pastor goes on to saying, I mentioned Project Hood and also let her know that several admirable nonprofits in Ferguson, Missouri, the town that actually put Black Lives Matter on the map, had not received a dime from the organization. But the neighbor didn't really care. So Pastor Corey goes on to say, listen, what about Ferguson, Missouri, where Black Lives Matter actually started? The birthplace of Black Lives Matter. They have never seen a single dime from the $90 million that's come in. And this is the same story that you're going to hear throughout most of the black communities around the United States of America. The whole thing was an act put on, endorsed, and sponsored by the Democrats for votes. And we all know it. It's no surprise at this point. We all know that it was put on. It comes around every 4 years. They just switch the game plan. But the strategy is always the same. The brand is different. This time it was Black Lives Matter. And you better believe they jumped on board that and ran with it and continue to push the narrative and ram it down everybody's throats and cause the biggest divide in the history of the United States. Let's be honest. We have never been more divided as a nation. All because the Democrats wanted power. All because they knew they needed a narrative so severe and so discriminatory in order to really divide this country, in order to gain the black community's votes, promising them in return they'd be back to build their communities. I don't see Kamala Harris on the ground. I don't see much of Kamala Harris at all. I don't see Bernie Sanders, AOC, traveling from city to burnt down city, rebuilding. I don't see on CNN money being flowed into these communities. Where is the money? Forget the Democrats altogether. Where's Black Lives Matter? Oh, it's just an idea. Okay, well, an idea can't have a bank account. So who's the group that actually has the money? Who's the group that has the $90 million? What are they doing with that money? Well, here's an interesting video I'm going to show you, because local Black Lives Matter chapters are still asking the same damn question. They're also wondering, where is our money? Let's take a look.
Put your fucking hands up right now.
God, man, in the car. I'm not a bad guy. He's not responsive right now, bro.
As you can see, there's tons of chapters all over the country Black Lives Matter DC wants to know where the money is. Between July 2017 and 2019, $4.5 million have been raised just in that one time period.
We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
And out of all this money, only $328,000 went to local chapters.
Are not getting any of the zillions of dollars that are pouring into those who want to donate to Black Lives Matter.
More than $70 million went to left-leaning candidates and causes in a day, shattering records this campaign cycle for the online fundraising juggernaut Act Blue.
So far, folks have used our platform to donate $3.8 billion.
You chose hope and unity, decency, science, and yes, truth.
So it's very clear that there's something insanely wrong here. And we're all still trying to get to the bottom of it. $328,000, as we just saw, went to local chapters. Of the $90 million, only $328,000 went to local chapters. Where is the other $89,700,000? And you saw even Black Lives Matter DC is sending out tweets. Where's our money? So it's not even people like me or journalists out there around the world questioning where the money is. It's the own local Black Lives Matter chapters asking, where is our money? And nobody seems to have an answer. We only just beat it out of Black Lives Matter how much money they even raised in the first place. It was only till a few weeks ago that we were able to actually get them to disclose how much money they raised. And now that they've disclosed it, we still don't see what they're doing with it. All we see or hear is CNN talk about how amazing Black Lives Matter is. All we hear is that Black Lives Matter is up for a Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, great, but who cares about any of that? How are they going to help build the black communities? How the people that they killed, the people that they beat on the streets, the businesses that they destroyed and burnt to the ground, where and when are they going to start fixing these cities up? And it blows my mind how many of my white liberal friends think that putting a flag or a Black Lives Matter sign in their yard is justification to show support for their cause. Because I know that they've never really done anything to support the black communities in the first place. And again, if you were here in the beginning of the show, we talked about the fact that a pastor in the south side of Chicago said the same thing about his own black friends. He said, where were you guys decades ago? Where were you when Ferguson, Missouri, where Black Lives Matter started, was asking for money? Nobody jumped on the bandwagon until Black Lives Matter was trending, until hashtag BLM was a proud stamp you can wear or a crest you can wear on your body of armor to feel good about yourself. That's all that it was. And that's all that Black Lives Matter has been to so many Americans. Just a symbol of pride and self-righteousness to make them feel better about themselves that they actually donated to the black community. When, in fact, these people, including the black community themselves, have never done a damn thing to help lift the black communities up in the first place. So everybody feels like throwing a check here or there is going to make up for the decades of lack of contribution towards the black community. That's not how it works. And that's why I continue to laugh at the entire movement. because all it is a silly little short-term trend that's going to fade and die away just like pop stars do with one-hit wonders. That's all that Black Lives Matter is. It's a one-hit wonder. And it's a shameful, very shameful situation that so many people have gotten caught up in. And all of the companies that have donated money, we haven't seen a single penny of that go into these black communities. So local chapters are wondering where their money is. Act Blue, a platform that supposedly raised $3.8 billion. Where is that money? And if you forget about all the Black Lives Matter money and just focus on government for a second, how about the stimulus package that was just approved today in the House? That's now a done deal. How much money of that $1.9 trillion is earmarked for black communities, if any at all? So the whole thing is a very hypocritical joke. I continue to call it out for the BS scam that it is, because that's all it is. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of black members of the community who have now jumped on the bandwagon and are starting to see the movement for the lie that it really is, that are starting to see Kamala Harris for the hypocrites that she really is, or the Democratic Party for the users and abusers that they really are. Because that's exactly what these people are. They used and abused the black community for their votes. And then when they won the election, they tossed them to the curb. Let's head over to the Keyboard Warrior Cam and take a look at what the black community, or what other members of both the white and black community, think about the fact that Black Lives Matters disconnect with America's struggling neighborhoods. Darlene says it's very sad. Do they have any idea the harm they cause to people from their own neighborhoods? I don't think they do. Paula says BLM should be paying for the destroyed cities with their $90 million instead of taxpayers for generations to come will pay. That's a great point. Who's going to pay for all this money? How many taxpayers are now going to have to bail all these broken, burnt down Democratic-run cities? How much money are we going to have to pay out of pocket to fix this up? Because we all know it didn't come out of the stimulus. Therefore, there's only one other place it's going to come out of if Black Lives Matter aren't going to be supporting financially themselves. It's going to come out of the taxpayers' money. That's all it is going to come out of. We're all going to suffer now and Paul is right, for generations to come. We're going to suffer. Our children are going to suffer. Because don't tell me that $90 million, even if Black Lives Matter gave all $90 million back to these black communities or these cities that have been destroyed and burnt to the ground, you can't possibly tell me that $90 million is going to cover it. Billions of dollars in damage has been done here. So even if BLM puts all $90 million into it, it's still not even going to put a dent in this. Therefore, leaving the taxpayers once again royally screwed, picking up the pieces of the Democratic Party. Heather says, and what about Minneapolis or Portland? Okay, we're only talking about the south side of Chicago. We're not even talking about all of Chicago here. We're talking about the south side of Chicago being battered, and they haven't received a single penny. No one's even showed up to their doorstep to offer help and support. Not a single politician, not a single Black Lives Matter director, nobody. So many lives and jobs lost this past year to the violence. Portland, Minneapolis, Chicago, New York, LA have been destroyed. And we don't hear from Kamala Harris, who stood by the protests and encouraged the violence. Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, Chris Cuomo from CNN, all applauded it. And we don't see them in front of the cameras with their crew on the ground recording and filming the rebuild of these cities. We don't see anything. And that's how you know this whole thing was a sham. You don't have to take my word for it. The fact that we see nothing out there in the local media, not a peep from anybody, has to tell you that there is nothing being done right now. And you can't tell me, oh, well, we'll get to it, because these people need help right now, right this second. They need you to get to it like yesterday, because their businesses, after generations and tens of thousands of dollars put into it, have been burnt to the ground, have been lost. And they're not making money right now. So unless they get back up and running today, their lives continue to be financially destroyed. And it's only going to get worse for these people. Brenda says, well, all the millions they raised should be used to rebuild these cities since they destroyed them. Their logic, I'm offended, let's destroy our neighborhoods. So effing stupid. And that's what they've done. They've gone in and destroyed their own businesses, their own towns. Where is the logic in any of this? It's outrageous and it's ridiculous. Howard says the BM movement, I think he meant BLM, the BLM movement had nothing to do with black people. If it did, they would have already been helping these families trying to get their kids in school and off the streets dealing drugs and committing violence. Their mantra is destroy the nuclear family, spread racism and Marxism, make as much money as we can, and don't help anybody except ourselves. And you even just saw in the video I played for you guys, she very clearly said, we're a Marxist organization. So they're not even trying to hide the fact that they are what they are. But what is very hypocritical about the situation, and Howard is very right here, he says, this has nothing to do with black people. If it did, they would have already been helping these families. And it's no different than what the pastor and the south side of Chicago told the reporter, the Fox News reporter. He said, I've been trying to get my black neighbors to help rebuild these cities for decades now, and nobody wanted to. Nobody responded. There's been hundreds of charities that have come through here trying to help and asked if we would just lift a finger to start the movement, and nobody batted an eye. And then the trend BLM came along, and all of a sudden, because they get to finally be in the limelight, they get to finally put themselves on display for the world to see, they start dropping cash. And now look, the cameras are gone. The cameras are gone. We've all gone home. Nobody cares anymore. We have the George Floyd trial coming up. Jury is being selected as we speak this week. A fence is going around Minneapolis. They are putting up barricades. They're scared to death of what's going to happen in that city. Not if, but when Derek Chauvin gets off. Because we know he's going to get off. He was following a procedure. He was absolutely within his legal rights to be kneeling on the neck of George Floyd. Sadly, George Floyd passed away, whether it was from the overdose or the move itself or the procedure itself. We don't know. But he's going to get off. And they're scared to death right now of Black Lives Matter, Summer of Violence, round 2 starting all over again. And we better believe we're going to see a tremendous amount of protests. So before they start burning down Minneapolis all over again, they might want to think this time, think it through, that they're not going to get any financial support, they're not going to get any political support, and they're not going to get any stimulus support because they didn't receive any of that the first time around. So why would all of a sudden politicians and celebrities and Black Lives Matter funds come rushing to their aid? Because they didn't from the last summer. So it's very clear that history does tend to repeat itself. And the message is, I wouldn't burn anything down because you guys are not going to get a bailout because you've been left high and dry, and you've been royally screwed on the last round. So we can only imagine you're going to be screwed once again. Chris says, why doesn't this pathetic organization do something like spend their money on rehabs, housing, and education for the poor? If they really care about the disenfranchised, they would find good ways to help. But that's not what Soros and the Dems want. Wake up, people. The answer for your happiness is right in front of you. Become the heroes, not the problem. That's a great statement. When are they going to become the heroes? Because right now, BLM is a problem. It's a very violent group. All we see in the news is Black Lives Matter protesting violently. And I don't care if it's only a handful of them. They represent the group. So instead of being the problem, instead of continuing to now get ready to burn Minneapolis down to the ground, because they will bring that city down the second the jury announces a not guilty verdict. Get ready for that city to be brought down to the ground. Maybe, just maybe, they could think to start being part of the solution this time around. America's heard them. We've heard their message. We do need police reform. They've won their objective. Their objective was to get the American people to understand that there's a real problem within the police force. There's a real problem with discrimination when it comes to black communities. We heard that message loud and clear. I heard it. I believe it. I've seen it. I'm not naive to think there isn't a problem. And many of my friends know there's a problem. But it doesn't mean that they still got screwed. Okay? It doesn't mean that politicians are going to abandon them once again, because they are. They're absolutely going to abandon them. It doesn't mean that they get to continue to destroy America. They do need to now be part of the solution, not the problem. And as soon as they start doing that, I'll start having a lot more respect for this group. Jose says, it's called Black People with Influence exploiting other black people instead of actually helping them. Been going on forever. It has. Why do only some black people see this? Why doesn't the whole community see this? Why do people like Candace Owens get it, but so many others don't? Why do only certain black people understand this is a sham? This has been going on forever. And that black people with influence constantly are exploiting other black people instead of actually helping them. When is the entire black community going to understand this? We all know the Democrats will not be held accountable for what happened. We know that. The taxpayers, unfortunately, are going to be the ones who are going to pay the bill. We're going to be the ones who are going to suffer financially. So we know the Democrats aren't going to be held accountable. But I do think the black communities are going to finally start to see the Democrats for the frauds that they are and the users that they are, and that only every 4 years, come time for election, do they ever hear from these politicians. That's the only time they get the attention from the Democratic Party, is come election. And then they disappear, just like we've seen. I mean, look, it's only been 4 months since Biden was sworn into office. It's only been 4 months since the Democrats took power. Have we seen any of them out on the Black Lives Matter trail since? I haven't heard Kamala say 2 words about it. They have literally just left them high and dry. So I do think the next time around, I think the black community is going to turn a shoulder to this Democratic Party. I do think that they're going to finally see them for the fakes and phonies and frauds that they really are. And that although the Democratic Party won't be held accountable, I think they're going to lose a lot of black support come the next election. I think their days are numbered with the black community. Trisha says BLM is a Marxist political organization that cares nothing about black people nor anyone else. BLM is all about destruction and their own rise to power, period. That's all we've seen. Mary says BLM is for anything but helping black people. Who's running it? Who's examining the books? What are they supporting? Why isn't anyone or any news agency digging into them, and whoever is receiving the funds? Again, where are these people? I just said in the beginning of the show, they claim Black Lives Matter is just an idea. It's really not a corporation. It's not an organization. Okay, fine. But somebody owns that bank account. Who owns the bank account with the $90 million inside of it? And What are those people doing with that money? Where are the news agencies reporting on what's going to happen with this money? I hear less and less from my black friends. I really do. I think they're starting to finally see this sham for what it really is. I think the black community is finally starting to see the Democrats for the fakes that they really are, because it's gone very quiet from my black community, my black friends. I don't hear from them as much anymore. I used to get slammed. I used to get called a racist. I used to be told I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm white. I have no clue what they've been through. I mean, I would get murdered and raked through the coals on social media every time I try to say Black Lives Matter is a bullshit, fraudulent organization. And they'd scream at me, how dare you? And I said, no, guys, listen. It's not that I don't agree with your movement. It's not that I don't agree with police reform. I do think Black Lives Matter. I do think we need police reform. I agree with the movement. I just think the whole thing on the surface is a scam. I think whoever's orchestrating and running the show financially and politically are frauds. And I still, to this day, continue to think so, especially now seeing that everybody has turned their back to Black Lives Matter and the black community the second Biden won the presidency. Chantel says BLM is a terrorist organization. They take money from people and put it in their pockets. They don't do anything to help any community in this country. And you know what? Why did we need Black Lives Matter to come along before the Democrats decided to do something for the black community? They don't need... I mean, look, the Democrats are printing money left, right, and center. We clearly have seen that with the last few stimulus packages that they've thrown to the American people. I mean, they are printing trillions of dollars every few months now. Print another trillion. Who cares? We're already screwed as a country. Print another $1 trillion for the black community. I'd like to see a stimulus package go through that is 100% earmarked for the black community. Don't give it to the airlines. Don't give it to big box corporations who are all looking for a constant handout. Give it to the black communities, and 100% to those communities. Give it all to the local BLM chapters who have been royally screwed out of any of the $90 million that Black Lives Matter continues to hoard in their bank accounts. That's what I would like to see. That will be worth more to me than any BS movement or hashtag that's trending right now that we all know dies quicker than a one-hit wonder. So that's what I would like to see. And as soon as I start to see the government do that, as soon as I start to see the trillions of dollars or billions of dollars or however much the government wants to earmark for black communities, until I start to see that, I'm going to continue to call out BLM for the hypocritical sham that they are. And I won't stop, because that's exactly what they are. And that's exactly what the entire Democratic Party is, a fraud. They never cared in the first place. And I will say it over and over again. And nobody can prove me wrong. You can't prove me wrong, because I don't see them on the ground fixing up these communities. Almost a year later, these riots were last summer. And you better believe that CNN would be on the ground filming every single last nail into the wall of a building that's been rebuilt. They would make such a spectacle out of this. Remember, we're talking about a party who paraded the National Guard around D.C. for weeks to now months to put on a spectacle for the American people. A news organization that makes a 5-second insurrection look like the biggest coup that's ever attacked America. So they love putting on a show. The sad thing is, there is no show for them to put on. CNN has nothing to film. And that's how we know. And now I'm starting to think that's how the black community knows and are getting very discouraged over the whole thing. They know their money's not coming. They know their financial aid is not coming. They're now leaving it up to the cities to fend themselves. The taxpayers of Minneapolis, they didn't want this. They didn't want rioting in their backyard. Just because George Floyd died in the city of Minneapolis doesn't mean the taxpayers and the residents of that city need to now suffer for decades because a group went rogue and decided to burn the whole city down. How's that fair to any of them? And let's not remember, George Floyd was a criminal with a rap sheet a mile long. Let's not paint him out to be a martyr here. It's not like George Floyd was Gandhi or Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. Yeah, then we'd have a real reason to be pissed off. But he was a criminal with a rap sheet a mile long who held up pregnant women and died on a ridiculous amount of fentanyl. He was a drug dealer, a drug user, a criminal. And we're now burning cities down for this guy. This is not fair to the black communities. And now they are in big, big trouble because of it. Dennis says, in my opinion, Black Lives Matter is the most racist group of the decade. They say they want equal rights, but they are literally separating the races. They are. The black race dominates all races right now. They are getting more treatment than we've ever seen any race get before. And they're not even trying to hide it. And you know what? If you want to play the catch-up game for a couple years, go for it. Fine. But is that not the very definition of racism itself? When you give preferential treatment to black people? Because I know what a lot of you guys are thinking, or at least a lot of my black friends are thinking. Well, it's about time we get special treatment. It's like, hold on a second. Special treatment is the very definition of racism. If you get a job over me because you're black, that's racist. Because nobody's ever given me special treatment. I worked my ass off for what I have. Sure, I'm white. I can't really help the color of my skin, just like the next person can't. But we all worked pretty damn hard. And regardless of the fact that there may have been some sort of underground secret handshake treatment for white people, it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't the norm. It wasn't encouraged, and it wasn't provoked. Now, look at this. We're promoting and giving the black community a tremendous amount of special treatment. And nobody seems to say anything about it. Nobody seems to think that's racist, because it is the very definition of racism. So we have now swung so far the other way that white people are now being put on the back burner, that Asian people, Indian, are all being put on the back burner. Hispanic, these poor Hispanic race that needs to get ahead in life. What about them? What about lifting them up? What about helping them? Equality is supposed to be everybody on the same playing field. Everybody together being lifted up. Well, right now, I see black people and equality. That is not equality. When black people are constantly put on a pedestal. That, to me, tells me that no one wants equality right now. They want to put black people ahead of everybody else to make up for whatever victim card they want to play for the last decades or centuries. But let's not sit here and pretend there's anything equal about what's going on right now. Let's head back to the keyboard warrior cam and see what the American people have to say about the black communities getting not a single dime from the $90 million raised for Black Lives Matter. Jennifer says, well, then they need to be the ones to pay to fix the cities they destroyed, not the taxpayers that had nothing to do with the riots. And here's an idea. How about Democrats pay for this? You guys voted Biden. You voted Kamala. You're the one who stuck Black Lives Matter flags in your backyards. You go pay for this. You write a check. When I get a bill and see that my tax has gone up, I'll send my Democratic friends the difference. They could pay the difference in my tax bill if my taxes go up because of this BS. So taxpayers shouldn't have to pay. And if they must, we should forward that bill to the Democrats, because Democrats, sorry, you were in favor of this nonsense. You were in favor of supporting Kamala Harris and everybody else as they destroyed these cities. Did you think about the $2 trillion bill that the country was going to suffer when Black Lives Matter was marching through country to country, bringing it all down? I bet if you knew how much damage you personally would have been liable for, you probably would have had a change of heart. You'd probably throw that BLM sign away. I'm not saying that you wouldn't support black people, because I support black people. I love black people. I just don't support this hypocritical and very fraudulent organization. Jeff says, why aren't they being charged with inciting riots in the same way Trump was? I mean, I've battered that to death. I've talked about it over and over again on the show. I don't understand why they got away with it. I don't understand how Kamala Harris was not impeached for setting up GoFundMe accounts to bail out criminals who were charged with burning and beating people on the streets and destroying businesses. For months it went on, and we don't see these politicians get charged or impeached the same way we saw Trump. That's how one-sided America is right now. Donna says the looting, fires, and violence was criminal. I don't care who you are. My heart hurts for the lives and livelihoods of these people who were victims of peaceful, my ass protests. There was nothing peaceful about it. We saw the violence, and it went on for months. There was nothing peaceful about this. Daniel Perdue, in our own backyard here in Rochester, New York, was the man who suffered and died out in the street in the cold of an overdose. The officers got off. Black Lives Matter took to the streets. And the media didn't want to cover the violent parts of it. They only covered the peaceful kumbaya hymns that they sung. But I have the footage. We did a live about it the other day. I guest spoke on Kimberly Ray from Kimberly Ray's Kimberly's Revolution podcast. And they highlighted the screaming and the black people up in the cops' face and the cussing and the horrific attacks that the police were getting from the peaceful protesters. So the media continues to hide today all of the disgraceful and violent parts of the BLM riots. I guess they learned from the summer. Let's not highlight to the country just how violent this group really is. Bill says this is how effed up this country is. You have people like this burning down people's buildings and homes, looting, helping Democrats out with their corruption, and they get a lot of money for doing it. Well, they're not seeing any of the money in return, that's for sure, because so many cities throughout America right now are hurting and struggling, and they've admitted that they have not received a single penny of this $90 million. Chicago is just one. Minneapolis, LA, New York, Michigan, Detroit. So many cities are hurting, and they're going to hurt for generations to come. Timothy says BLM is nothing but a racist hate group, and anyone that backs or support it is by far more racist than those whom support All Lives Matter. No money to any state whom refused assistance to help the rioting, and let it go on. Obey the law and do not resist. It is that simple. That's a good point. No state should get a bailout for letting this go on in their backyard. I don't care what they allowed in Minneapolis. I don't care what went on in Chicago. I don't care what autonomous zones were set up because they were too cowardly to take these terrorist groups out. That has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with any of us in cities and states that were not part of those violent acts. So I don't think those states should get bailed out. I think the Black Lives Matter group and the Democratic Party need to dig deep for the money and bail these cities that they supported out for the violence and the attacks that they caused. Sheila says, I do not care about the group BLM when there is strong evidence that all lives matter. So pity cry your grievances when all you do is kill people. Children and the American people do not have pity for you. Go back to the rock you came forth. Pretty strong language. This is how a lot of people feel right now. They're furious. They are pissed off. Regardless of how Black Lives Matter was meant to start, regardless of what the true movement was supposed to be about, it got derailed the second violence was normalized. The second violence became mainstream throughout America. It pissed a lot of people off, including myself. And there's no going back for me on how I feel about this group. There's no going back for a lot of my friends on how they feel about the group. You can call me racist. You can call me a white supremacist. I can give a shit what you call me. The fact of the matter is, it's very apparent it's a violent group. And I don't care about an ounce of good that may have come from it when so much pain and suffering was tolerated. Our very own politicians who ended up in the end screwing the black community, because they still, to this day, of the 90 million that they reported and supposedly the billions of dollars that's not been reported, have not been given back to the black communities. And they're struggling today, and they're wondering if they're ever going to be able to rebound. So what did they really solve? What did Black Lives Matter really gain from all of this violence, from this movement? They gained a Democratic president. That's pretty much all they got. If we start to see police reform, that'll be a great step in the right direction. I thought it was a joke that Black Lives Matter was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. I think it was way too early. I'm not saying that they won't deserve it in the future, because they might. But I'd like to see some action taken first. I'd like to see some real reform. I'd like to see black communities be lifted up. I'd like to see black mayors stop stuffing their own pockets and actually help the black community. I'd like to see black politicians on the ground lifting these communities up. That's what I'd like to see. And from both sides, both Republicans and Democrats. I'm not putting all the blame on Democrats, although I think they're very largely responsible for a lot of the violence that concerned. But I'm not suggesting for even 2 seconds that this movement is 100% down to Democrats only. It's down to all of us, black people, Republicans and Democrats. We all need to be putting our hands in our pockets, rolling our sleeves up, getting stuck in on the ground to help build these communities. Because anybody who claims that they support Black lives, anybody who wants to stick a yard sign in their yard or a flag on their house, better back that up with some real action. Better back that up with supporting the black community and getting your kids to support it as well. Because putting a sign in your yard is the most ridiculous and self-righteous act I've ever seen any of my white liberal friends commit. And it's a joke, and I don't buy it for 2 seconds. I don't think they mean it when I've never seen them lift a single finger for the black community. You don't get to raise a flag, march around town chanting Black Lives Matter just so you can sleep better at night. That's not how this works. You actually go downtown, you go into these black communities, and you fix them up. And you put your money where your mouth is. That's what it means to support Black Lives Matter. So here we are, $90 million later, and black communities have nothing to show for it. Local Black Lives Matter chapters haven't received a single penny. We just saw a poor pastor in the south side of Chicago tell a Fox News reporter, I haven't even seen a single politician, a single dime. No one has been around to help us. Where's the money? And I'm going to continue to ask where the money is, because we deserve to know, all of us. Every single resident of these cities that have been burnt down, they demand to know where's the damn money. And Kamala Harris better step up soon and start to show us that she really meant well instead of hiding behind the White House, which is what all the Democrats are doing. Thank you guys so much for joining me today here at You Made It Political. We stream live every day, 3 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. We're also on Amazon Music, Spotify, iTunes, and TuneIn. Have a great night.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.